I'm Gracie, and today I'm going to be talking about the process of making a Victorian smoking jacket. Not for myself, but for Ollie as both a Christmas and anniversary gift, because it's kind of an involved gift. And they're the person who's editing this video, so it's also kind of a thank you for that. This video isn't going to be about the history and purpose of smoking jackets so much as it is going to be about learning a new skill and venturing into a new era. I've never really made anything Victorian like this before, so you're as new as I am. I'm using the pattern by Black Snail Patterns for a Victorian smoking jacket, and so most of the instructions that I'm following are coming from there. And because of that, I'm not going to be going super in-depth into the construction. I'm more just going to be talking about the process of how I learn new skills and what it's like to try something new and know that it won't turn out perfectly, and that's okay. I didn't do a mock-up for this project because I was feeling lazy, so any final fitting issues are the fault of myself, not of the pattern. This project involves several different fabric types. There's a cotton velveteen, which is the main body of the smoking jacket, as well as a blue silk velvet, which is for the lapels and the cuffs and the pocket lining. I only had a little bit of that, but I wanted to make use of it because it's so pretty. But because this is a tailored garment with a fair bit of structure, there's also a lot of inner layers, and those are made of lots of different fabrics. So we have some linen and some cotton calico and some cotton organdy. Oh, and then of course the linings. The main lining is a really pretty kind of woven patterned silk, but I only had a little bit of that, so the sleeves are going to be lined with kind of a red rayon, which I think ended up complementing the lining pretty well. And because there were so many different fabrics, it was pretty difficult to keep track of everything as I was cutting it out. But luckily the pattern that I used has kind of diagrams that say, oh, cut this bit out of this lining fabric and cut these pieces out of this fabric. So I was able to cut out everything, and then I was able to start sewing. You might think that the first steps to making this smoking jacket would be to start stitching together the pieces, but you'd be wrong. As it turns out, I first had to prepare the pattern pieces. For the most part, this involved basting linen inner lining to the front panels. This is going to basically serve as the support for the lapels once the smoking jacket is done. But I had to add that before I could even start assembling the jacket. I also theoretically could have done welt pockets at this stage, but I decided to procrastinate on my pockets and do patch pockets instead, which allowed me to put those off till later because I was not in the mood to do pockets. Once I had my linen inner lining basted into place, it was time to begin pad stitching. And lest you think I know what I'm doing with this, I do not. My pad stitching is basically a conjecture based on videos I've watched of other people pad stitching and images I've seen, but I'm not a trained tailor in any way, shape, or form, so I'm just kind of doing what I thought would work. And what I did for this was I basically pad stitched in a zigzag shape. So you would see the stitch on one side, and then the zag of the zigzag would pick up a little bit of the cotton velveteen on its way under, passing through the linen interlining and then back up. And holding the fabric in a curved way as you're doing this pad stitching, basically it locks those curves into shape, and so you end up getting a folded over lapel, which is what you want because lapels are supposed to fold over. And the other thing that I found helpful for this was drawing parallel lines along my lapels so that I could make sure that my pad stitches were nice and even looking. Even with all the pad stitching, we're still not done preparing this front panel. The next step was to attach cotton tape around the edges of the pad stitched area. This creates both a clear definition of where the roll line of the lapel will be, and it also ends up kind of finishing off the outer edge of the pad stitching along the front edge of the smoking jacket. And I think this just ends up making the whole thing look nicer once the jacket is done, but it also looked quite pretty even before I added the lapels, because the lines of tape ended up looking very architectural and even, which I really like. I like things that look even and neat. Having procrastinated on the pockets long enough, I decided I should probably work on those. These are velveteen and lined in silk velvet, which in hindsight is way too floopy. I ended up having to use a bunch of basting and some cotton tape and a bunch of stitching to get them to sit evenly so that I had a clean finish on the inside and the outside of the pocket, and so that they were shaped like squares rather than like floopy rectangles. The next step was to attach soutache trim to the pockets in a decorative manner. Soutache is basically like silk spaghetti. It's often used to create ornate designs, but I went for just a simple loop-de-loop on the pocket, which is what the pattern showed in their version, and I thought it looked quite nice, and it ends up giving a little bit of visual interest to the front of the smoking jacket. With all that done, I finally got to begin assembling the jacket. And because this is after 1850 and the beginning of the widespread use of the sewing machine, I got to make use of this 1929 Singer sewing machine. This one's electric, and I don't think that a Victorian smoking jacket like this would have been sewn with an electric machine, but I might be wrong. I think in the Victorian period, most machines were foot-powered, but I really like this machine. My uncle helped restore it, and it sews better than my modern one. I began by stitching the front pieces to the back and to its lining, and then I got to add lapel facings to cover up the pad stitching in blue velvet. After lots of basting, the lapel facing was tacked to the interior of the smoking jacket, and the seam allowance is going to be covered by the lining, so I didn't have to worry about that. From there, it was a process of stitching together the side seams, which I was also able to do by machine, and then dealing with the lining on the interior of the jacket. For the most part, this was just whip stitching the lining to the inside of the jacket, except around the hem, where first I turned up the hem of the cotton velveteen and then folded over the lining, over like the top of the hem allowance, so that the hem allowance wouldn't show. I probably should have followed the instructions more closely here because I ended up having to kind of do some more fiddling and basting than I probably would have. And the other thing I realized is that hemming a garment like this is probably much better done if it's hanging. So if I had put it on my dress form, that would have given me a better idea of how to make sure that the hem was even, as well as how to make sure that the hem hung nicely. I don't know how to put that, but the hem doesn't hang as nicely as I'd like it to, and I think it would hang better if I had done the hemming and pinning while it was hanging up on a dress form. Once the jacket was mostly assembled, I had the privilege, or possibly punishment, of working on the sleeves. First, I started on the cuffs, because these are the most complex part of the sleeves. I wanted a silk velvet cuff lined with cotton velveteen, but from my experience with the pockets, I knew that I needed some sort of inner lining, or else these cuffs would be way too floopy. I ended up choosing a stiff cotton organdy, which I think worked pretty well because my cuffs stand up quite nicely. But first, what I did was I basted the cotton organdy to the blue silk velvet, and I basted all over so that the silk velvet could not move an inch. Then I used some soutache trim to apply a decoration to the cuff that matched the decoration on the pocket. Once that was done, I assembled the cuffs and sleeves as was described in the instructions, which was not very difficult, and then I set the sleeves. I should have probably basted them in and checked the fit, but I was so done with this project by that point that I decided to just put them in and call her good. And they fit okay, so I mean, don't do what I did, but it worked out for me. Once that was done, I had to stitch the lining to the allowance of the arm side to finish off the interior of the jacket. But with that, the whole garment was done. And I mean, there was still a bunch of basting thread in it, which I did eventually have to rip out. But other than that, this was a long project, but it ended up going pretty quickly once I actually got working on it. This is the smoking jacket. I'm getting to model it because Ollie didn't want to be on film, and so it doesn't fit me. It's a little bit too big, but I think it turned out really cute, and it's super cozy. There's so many layers of fabric that it's really warm. I think projects like this are just really good for trying to explore a new era and learn new techniques, especially if you can find a pattern that has good instructions and maybe some diagrams, because that way you can learn new techniques, and you're not trying to figure out from a compilation of internet vlogs, which is always a little bit difficult for learning a new skill. And the other good thing about this is it's an everyday garment, so if I was making this for myself and I wanted to venture into Victorian clothes, but I didn't know if I wanted to make a full outfit, making something like this allows me to make something that I can wear not just in a Victorian style, but as a modern person. Of course, I'm giving it away, but it still applies. Let me know in the comments if you have any projects or patterns that you like as gateways through new eras. I'd love to hear about that. Thank you to you for watching. Thank you to Ollie for their help in filming and editing this video, and for liking this smoking jacket. Don't worry, they're very happy with it. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!